the group in BPPS. I'm joined by my colleagues, Benjamin Kumpf and Malik in particular here on the innovation side. It's a great pleasure to welcome our partners from Vodafone. It's Shannon Lucas and Jacob Cooney who made the trip here today to tell us a little bit about what Vodafone does around innovation in general and how that potentially could present entry points for the way we work with them. The innovation team runs an innovation facility out of the Development Impact Group. We provide small seed funding. We've funded about 85 different initiatives over the last 2 years in our country offices. And the whole idea is to try and support initiatives that can be scaled up and that support the broader vision of strategic plan and how we keep UNDP as relevant as possible to the different contexts that we work in. We won't be speaking about that today. I'm very happy to share more information on that. And speaking of sharing, I'm also wearing the knowledge management hat, and most of that is around knowledge sharing, which is why we thought we'd throw open the conversation here a little bit today. We spent a great morning with Shannon and Jacob talking about potential entry points around all kinds of innovative stuff, from big data to mobile feedback mechanisms. But we thought we'd also take some time today to also open this up, the conversation with the rest of the organization, to see what do you see as entry points around innovation and around partnerships in your areas of expertise. So without much further ado, I think I'll hand it over to you, and you can take us through your presentation. Then I guess we'll have it open for your questions. So thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for joining us for lunch. I'm excited to be here. Social innovation is one of my areas of passion, so I'm super excited to be here working with the UN innovation team, UNDP innovation team. I'm Shannon. I'm based in California in our Silicon Valley office. I've been with Vodafone for 5 years. I'm the director of innovation for our Vodafone Global Enterprise innovation team. And I'll talk in a little bit about what that means. But I want to start off with a question, and I'll take kind of the first people who think they have the best answer to this. What does innovation mean? Who's got the best definition of what innovation is? It's not a trick question.
Not a trick question.
Well, it's something that you create or to come up with new ideas.
Perfect.
To solve a particular problem.
Yes, you ready?
Yeah.
There's prizes involved. You didn't
there you
even
go.
know.
Come on.
So we have creation and ideas and new and projects. Awesome. Right. Anyone else want to add to that?
Courage to fail.
Ooh,
very good.
Very nice. I'm not gonna. Can you pass that down? There's no way I'm gonna make that.
Here, I'll do it.
Oh, there you go. Courage to fail is an important part of innovation for sure. And how about one more? One more brave soul, yeah?
Nowadays, prizes. I think it's taking something from one context and applying it to a new context to make something completely different.
Awesome. So taking something from one context and reimagining it and repurposing it to apply it to another problem or opportunity. Ready? Awesome. What you didn't hear there, and even though we're a technology company, you didn't hear anyone talk about technology and their definitions of innovation, which is really refreshing because in Silicon Valley, everyone thinks that a new app is a new kind of innovation, and that's not what our team is about. You'll see on the slide there, it says 21st century business transformation. There's a lot of ways that you can define what innovation is, the ability to adapt to survive, the ability to remain relevant. But for us, it's about business transformation. And I'll talk you through some of the examples of that as we go along. So actually, before I do that, how many here have heard of Vodafone? Please raise your hand. Everyone in the room, pretty much. Awesome. So that's not usually the case in the US, but I am talking with a very specific crowd here today. But I wanted to help you understand where I sit within the Vodafone footprint. So Vodafone is the world's second largest mobile operator after China Mobile. We have about 450 million users on our network globally. We have a presence in almost 150 countries when you combine all of our assets and services, including fixed line, LAN, WAN, and cloud services. And Vodafone Global Enterprise was created to help our largest multinational customers have one point of entry into all of those services globally. So historically, more than 9 years ago, you may have thought, well, Vodafone's in all these different countries. I can go to one place and have a consistent offering of services. And until Vodafone Global Enterprise, or VGE, was created, that didn't exist. But we're here today. So just like VGE is the single point of contact for multinationals into all of those offerings. And also we create specific solution sets for the specific challenges of those multinational organizations. The innovation team is the same thing. So it's a complex structure that I won't go into too much detail today. We did a little bit earlier, but we have operating companies where we own the majority share and partners and affiliates. But this is how we leverage and get scale across the globe, is through these different relationships. So how does innovation fit into all of this? Our innovation team program is about 4 years old. We were created by a gentleman named Juan Jose Juan. And he had been running products and services within our organization, VGE, and recognized a few challenges that were going on. One, we're a huge telecommunications company, and so a lot of the platforms that we're looking at rolling out, sort of by virtue of that global scale, are rather large and monolithic and take time to get to market. And we also have a pretty set technology strategy for the next 5+ years because of who we are. And so there wasn't a lot of conversations up front about the specific needs of the customers. We were looking kind of more broadly at the marketplace. And so what we did was we created this innovation program to be able to respond to the specific customer needs in a more agile and quick manner, because that's what we were hearing were the needs of our customers. Just like VGE was created to be that single point of contact for our customers into the Vodafone offerings and services, the innovation team is that conduit into all of the innovation activities going on within Vodafone. So we have 27 foundations globally, and we try and develop relationships with them to get an understanding about what they're doing. There's a group strategy and sustainability team at the very top level of Vodafone Group, and we work with them. There are R&D centers going on around the world. Some of them are in our office in Silicon Valley. We have a ventures team, and we have some members in our office in Silicon Valley there. So for us, and then of course there's regional innovation teams in the different operating companies, et cetera. So our goal is to be that single point of contact into all of those different activities and be able to surface them for our conversations with our largest partners and customers. The program was built, like I said, about 4 years ago, and we started, I was joking with these guys earlier, we started with these 4 pillars. I just recently, for a conference this week, had to go through the history and the evolution of the program, and our 4 pillars actually haven't changed. What's changed is kind of the focus over the years and the intensity with which we've been focusing on the 4 pillars. We started very strongly with the customer pillar that you see there. And this entire 4 quadrants is an iterative process. So any idea that comes out of this original box will go through all 4 boxes and potentially go through them again. We do customer engagements across the board. So we'll run innovation forums where we will bring together multiple companies and partners into a room and have an open conversation. We do innovation workshops like we did today with the innovation team here. We'll do boot camps for our customers and our internal stakeholders as well. All of that is about just highlighting the program and the capabilities of the innovation team. In the innovation workshops, what we do, there's a little bit more targeted and focused, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But for us, the understanding, we can go in kind of without agenda because mobility is really the heartbeat of today's innovation. And so we know that we can go in almost without agenda and talk with our customers about what their challenges or the opportunities or the projects that they're working on, and are clear that we're probably going to be able to support them in a lot of those initiatives. About 90% of the ideas that come out in those workshops then, and we use human design thinking and human design centered thinking, ideation skills, brainstorming, et cetera. About 90% of the ideas that come out of that workshop we can service in some way, shape, or form today. That leaves that kind of remaining 10% for us to focus on in 2 different buckets. We run about 100 workshops a year, so we may, over the course of running 50 different workshops, hear a recurring theme from our customers. So maybe it's about getting confidently connected with your subject matter experts anywhere in the world, kind of real time. That is so close to our core connectivity and knowledge management tools that it may be something that we want to tackle on our own. We call those the solo projects. The other kind of project that emerges increasingly, we're getting increasing demand for this, is a co-creation project. These are not traditional business development. It isn't you have part A and I have part B and we're gonna put them together and paint them red and call them something else. This is, you have part A and we have part B, and if we add this other thing on top of it and jointly invest, so maybe 50 to 100K from each side into this project development, we think we can bring something really transformational to market. In order to be able to execute on any of those ideas, thank you, we need to have a strong ecosystem of partners ready to go with us. And the way that we do that, first of all, is by demonstrating thought leadership. So speaking at conferences, writing white papers, running the forums. We host a number of ecosystem events in our office in Silicon Valley. So if you guys have colleagues or coworkers or friends that you think would be interested, please let us know. We run them here in New York and around the world, really. And that's all in service of us getting the best of breed partners so that as soon as an idea enters into the program, we have the partners lined up ready to execute, because we're trying to get these prototypes done in months. And if we have to spend 8 weeks finding the right partner, we've just shot ourselves in the foot. Also, we want to have partners with kind of the big strategic players too, like Google or LinkedIn, who might have closed APIs or constricted resources in terms of innovation partnerships. So we want to make sure that we've already had the conversations with them and demonstrated the value, so that when we go to them and say we'd really like that API for our prototype, they understand why and can work with us from the get-go. Once we have the partners lined up, then we look at our internal innovation ecosystem. So we were having a conversation today about the large, complex nature of both of our global organizations. Listen, doing innovation isn't easy. Traditionally, large organizations have an immune response to new things. That's true across the board. So what we need to do is to work to create a culture of innovation across the board, so that when we come to different stakeholders, they understand what it is that we're trying to do. They understand even just the vernacular, the words that we're using. What is human design centered thinking? What is ideation? What is really a prototype or an MVP, a minimum viable product? And so we also have this strong innovation champion team that I'm going to talk about more. But this is how we disseminate the innovation thinking. We run the boot camps across the organization. We put them through ideation sessions. Jacob got to be in one in July when we launched our Customer Experience Center here in New York. And the other big piece for us is what we call native innovation. So we have innovation champions from around the world who participate in the program. Because we're developing solutions for anywhere in the world. We just ran one with one of our largest consumer goods customers in London a couple of weeks ago, and we brought people in from Kenya because we knew that we were focusing on Kenya as a solution market, and we couldn't fly everyone to Kenya, but we could fly some of the people, the champions from Kenya, to bring in that native perspective into the room as we were doing the idea development. So we have the idea, we have the ecosystem, we have the internal culture in place, so we're ready to start executing. We have the enterprise studio. This is both a physical space in Silicon Valley. So we went rogue and we kind of took over half the office and went to IKEA and made it feel like the Stanford Design School. So it's a very fun place, and it's a co-working space. So come on in if you have people there. We're happy to have people come in and sit with us. But most importantly, it's a global methodology. So there's a lot of innovation development that had been going on around the organization. And we had some of the time and expertise to say, this is what's worked well in the past. This is what's not worked well, frankly. So let's pull all of that thinking together and give you guys the tools and kind of the expertise and guidance you need. So we will stay involved in projects almost from a CEO or executive consultancy approach, but we're not necessarily, as a 4-person team, involved in the execution of every product on the ground or prototype. Once we get that prototype done, we take it back to the customer. So if we heard one of those general trends in a bunch of those workshops, we might go back to one of those customers and say, we heard you talking about this pain point, and here's our first iteration trying to address that. What do you think? Or we may be developing kind of a business-to-business consumer thing, so we might take it with our co-creation partner to a marketplace and do some hypothesis testing or vetting of the prototype. Any questions about that? Okay, so I'm speaking later this week at an Intrapreneur conference here in New York City. How many people have not heard of the word Intrapreneur?
that we have.
Okay, a couple of people. Yeah, totally. It's a relatively new term, and this is my lead-in for my presentation this week. It was emerged in 1984, and the guy who coined the term is Gifford Pinchot. And the kind of tagline for him is "the dreamers that do." They're the people who are executing innovation within large organizations. So if you think of an entrepreneur who's, in Silicon Valley getting seed funding, and they have the idea and they're just relentlessly pushing until their idea sees the light of day, the intrapreneurs are the people within the large organizations who are serving that exact same function, except I would argue their job is harder. So our job is to find this community of intrapreneurs, the people who are always pushing the organization to be more perfect, to be better, to come up with the better ideas, to understand their customer better, to look for process improvements internally better, and to create a culture and an environment that gives them the freedom and the space and the opportunity to fail. We totally enable that and give them a safe space to do that, but also the opportunity to succeed by giving them the training, the tools, and the development that they need. We have about 50 champions today around the world. We're a little bit a victim of our own success. So we're doing a recalibration, and we're coming up with a tiered training and sort of leveling up program. We've gamified it. There are rewards, which I heard you guys were talking about. But this is really the lifeblood for us of our innovation program. We started off as a two and a half person team. We've grown to 4 people on the core team, but just executing 100 innovation workshops alone, we just could never do, let alone all of the other pillars that you saw of the program. We also do things like giving them visibility. So we'll have them write articles for our internal newsletter, for external copy, speaking at global events, etc. Our job is to find the best and the brightest and help make them shine. I will send this out to you. This is a crazy busy slide, but we also spoke a lot this morning about how important measurement is, and you guys probably know that better than most sectors. Measurement is super, super important. How do you demonstrate your relevance to the business and the impact? This is an interactive PDF. It's clickable. You can see all of the different 4 pillars and where we've had impact. We were asked sort of what we metric, customer satisfaction as well as employee satisfaction, how we're changing the perception, what we're actually sort of lining up in terms of opportunity pipeline and prototype pipeline. We're looking at the whole ecosystem in terms of how we track impact. Again, super busy slide. I'm happy to go through this at any point with anyone who's interested, but this is one of the methodologies that we've created. So this is one of the tools that we can hand off to the organization that says, we've done some co-creation with different customers and partners in the past. This is our lessons learned. This is how we streamline the process. We make it sort of broad enough so that it can be adopted by the different, localities, if you will, and adapted for different projects. Yeah, go ahead.
So it says there at the discovery stage, it says executive support.
Yes.
What does that mean?
We need executive support at every part of this process. So executive support for us is about doing an innovation workshop together, basically. All of these things kind of come together. So we basically won't do an innovation workshop unless we have some kind of executive support. For us, the executives are the people that we're bringing into the room. But once we come out of that, you'll see we might refine the idea with the actual sort of execution teams. We try and have an executive in those from both sides in those meetings. And the very next thing we do is we go get executive sponsorship again. And what we've learned, in order to hit this timeline of 2 to 3 months, which is still a sort of aspirational goal for us, we set up, when we enter this part right here, before we even get into the co-creation workshop, one of the levels of commitment from the executives that we've gotten is to put sort of monthly or bi-weekly pulse points on their calendars. So they have to commit to giving us time every couple of weeks to move this idea forward before we even start pursuing it, so that we know that they're serious. We're not asking for budget or resources or anything at that point. We're just asking for a half an hour time commitment every 2 weeks. If we can't get that, we know we shouldn't be moving forward.
On the first step, which is the innovation workshop, will you just explain more what are the ideas that come out and what you ought to go to that?
Yes, the whole rest of the talk is about that. Yeah, so, yep.
But maybe just a quick side note of this. I find this quite useful in terms of looking how we ourselves within UNDP are looking at innovation. Vodafone obviously is probably a more of a world leader around innovation. You have the technology side, so it's probably easier for many of your employees and even executives to think of themselves as being innovators. I think if you look at how we go about how we think of ourselves as employees of UNDP, we are being judged to the extent that we innovate ourselves. It's one of the key competencies that we try to look for in people. And many of us probably feel, well, but what are my entry points? Where do I really see where I can innovate? And I think we are probably, that's where we stop short of providing good guidance. And to me, because I can relate to some of the challenges and opportunities we face within the organization around executive support, for instance, the need to do the co-creation. This is a very good chart, but it also helps me kind of position myself as a UNDP staff within that broader innovation scheme of things that we need to develop. So it's quite a useful chart, I find.
Yeah,
we'll try and take and adapt it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sharing, this is all open source material. We're big into open innovation. As I was pulling together the slides for the entrepreneurship program, I was having a really hard time conceptually divorcing the innovation program from the entrepreneurship program. And I realized my first slide are arrows going into each other, because for us, you can't do, I just explained, you can't do innovation without the entrepreneurs, but the entrepreneurs have a really hard time innovating without the program to tap into. And so it's a really nice symbiotic thing where you have that top talent and you've given them the tools then to be able to execute. We do things on the bottom, so we've got the executive support. We are, like I said, this is an actual generative process, so we're asking both companies to commit. It's a minimum of 50K each. Sometimes it's bigger. We're looking at rapid prototyping, so it usually doesn't have to be massive, but it's enough to sort of get the sort of buy-in in or out from both executive teams. And then, like I said, it finally enters the studio officially down here, where we're doing we're doing kind of the anthropological studies of the users on the ground. For the one with the consumer goods company, we're going to be testing 3 of the ideas that came out of the co-creation workshop in Kenya in the month of December with different partners on the ground as an example. And our goal here is, again, it's not a product development, it's a prototype development. So we'll have different iterations of that within that time. And then we basically, when we feel like we have tested enough and we validated the hypothesis and we've overcome kind of the initial regulatory, commercial, ability to execute problems, we'll then take it back to the steering committee and say, so this is our recommendation. This is what we think it would take to get to the next step. Sometimes we actually recommend, like, here's our findings. We think we need to just stop here. And an important point is we have a stop sign at every single part. So we call it stops. It's stop valves, not failures. But, you can frame it however you want. But we're very transparent with both our partners and our internal stakeholders that getting to here and exiting is still a win. Because a lot of times organizations would have gone through this entire process. In fact, they would have spent a year on this idea before they got to, the execution of the regulatory environment's not right. And you would have wasted all of that time and money. So us having the stop valves is really important. If we get to here and we don't get executive sponsorship, we're out. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes. One of the traits of UNDP's culture is that there are no things. There is always, you learn lessons. Whatever piece of just project, project and that, you learn lessons, you adapt, and then you implement and scale up and things like that. What are your criteria for stopping, something, because this is, I think it would be, a key thing about our culture, to change our culture, to have an understanding of those tough moments and how, what objective means you use to judge whether even, if there are opportunities for learning lessons and adapting, sufficiently successful to warrant that extra. So what is it that you do for that?
So one challenge that we have is that, and I'll get to some of the ideas that are going through, but just at a broad stroke level, like we're using one that's currently in the studios, we're using data analytics from both Macro Network and a lighting provider for in-store retail analytics, consumer insight. Another one is working with an information provider and our network to create enough data sets to provide access to financial resources for smallholder farmers. It's such a broad breadth of projects that it's not like we can come up with a checklist of if this, then that, and that's when we fail or we don't. For us, honestly, there's a pretty strong, I would say ours is kind of two things. One is scale. So scale of adoption rate, scale of impact. I mean, there's different metrics that come along depending on what you're actually trying to do, which is why metricing is always so important. Like, you just need to keep validating and testing and metricing what the impact is. But the other one, honestly, is like the cultural resistance. Like, we will push up to a point, and if we're the only people that we get on board after, you know, X amount of time, it also depends on the willingness of our partners within the organization. Sometimes we just say, you know what, we had this, but we needed a little bit more executive support to get this off the ground, and we set up 3 calls and no one ever showed up. We have so much demand that we can cut our losses there and say, actually, that was an exit point for us. I think that, listen, we can talk about failure in our organization because we're an innovation team, but most organizations still have an allergic reaction to that. For us, lessons learned is really important, and I don't think that's a cop-out. I think what I just said is, you know, if you had wasted a year of this time, and you can demonstrate that you would have wasted a year of your time, but actually you pulled the stop trigger up here, and I handed off. I mean, one of the projects, we did so much like data surfacing that we were able to hand off the data to the team that ended up kind of pivoting and taking our stuff into another project. But I can articulate to the executives that all of that foundational information came from our team, and here's why we pivoted, and here's why that other piece of the organization is moving forward. So I think it's about metricing and communication, really. And then obviously it's always a question of go big or go home. And we've gotten really strategic about knowing where in our organization we can find homes for things. I think it's the same challenge in everything. You know, we're competing with really big monolithic platforms. And so, you know, something that is this big compared to the size that they're working on might not get the attention. So we find other places where we can find homes where there's more natural alignment. So it's really about understanding the DNA of your organization and where your ideas will have a home. There's no point in continually beating your head against something that you know just it can't by definition change sometimes. All right, so an innovation workshop, like I said, we do about 100 of these a year. We do them around the globe. I call this the flow and not the agenda, because when I go through kind of an overview for the innovation advocate on our customer side, and I get to this slide and they say, that sounds great, can you send me a bullet pointed agenda? I know that I don't have the right sponsor, because the point of this is we are interested in coming in and having a very open conversation like we had this morning. Like, what are you guys working on? Yeah. What are we working on? What are some of the strategies or trends that we're seeing? How are we both responding to them? And then getting the people in the room who own the business challenges and opportunities so that we can ideate solutions to those things that we surface together. It's a big trend. It's kind of common sense, but it's a big transformational shift too, into just really active listening to each other. And so I say to people, like, listen, if I knew what we needed to talk about, I would just come and say, hey, I've got these 10 things. Which one do you want? It solves your problem. But that's not what this is about. We try and get cross-functional stakeholders into the room. And this is really important. And this is where the magic happens. It's really about getting the right people. So the titles are important because you need the right senior level stakeholders who own the challenges, the opportunities, and the budget and the ability to execute. All of those things need to be true. The cross-functional piece is really important because, our customers and partners know their organizations better than we do. And so there's this amazing cross-pollination that happens. So we don't try and come in as experts in your field because we're not. But what happens is, your strategy person might actually have an insight that your HR person hadn't thought of because you sit close enough, but you're still tangential to each other. And we've sprinkled in this magic of all of these kind of trends and, visions of what could be. And then you guys can connect the dots to your own organization. The other thing that's really important for the workshops is more than getting the right titles in the room, is getting the right personalities in the room. So I need people in the room who are comfortable with this slide. They will give me a half a day or a full day of their time based on this slide. They're like, I'm so excited about the art of the possible with Vodafone globally. I have enough of a sense about what the innovation program is capable of that I'm going to go into this total exploratory conversation with them. And this is what it would look like. So you can see I haven't changed the agenda much. That's the agenda, and then this is the agenda for the day. So We're sharing visions, we're talking about transformation, and we're doing ideation. So we would start with your guys' vision. We would have a long conversation about that, and then we would share our vision. And these are some of the types of trends and things that we would talk about when we talked about our vision. So we're not here to come in and talk about our technology vision. If you want my CTO to come in and talk about, where 5 and 6G is going to be in 5 to 10 years, we can do that. That's not what this is. This is, what are the macro trends that we see and how are we responding to them? So this one is one of my new favorite ones. It's the global neural system. So I think everyone is probably familiar with the idea of the Internet of Things, or M2M, or connected everything. Pick a name, pick a day. If you layer on top of that then the idea of the smart data or the big data that you're going to get out of it, you start to create meaning out of the connections of all of the things. But when you start to bring in things like natural language processing and artificial intelligence, you take it to a whole another level where you actually have this almost organically functioning connected thing around the world. And the question becomes, what are the predictive things? What are the insights that you would like to get before you almost even knew to ask the question? And that's what the power of all of this is moving towards. We spoke about this one earlier too. This is one of my favorite topics, which is digital identities. And this, there's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice this. So the analysts are saying there's going to be about 5 digital identities that the millennials will be bringing into the workplace. Their relationship with the workplace is actually going to be much different than we all grew up, dealing with. So they're not going to work for one company for a really long time. There's going to be kind of like a group who are captaining the ship at any one large organization. And there's going to be people who are flowing in and out of that organization as contractors or part-time workers. And those people are also going to be having relationships either with their own side projects or with other organizations. Those people are going to be bringing in 5 different digital identities. And I use myself as an example, even though I'm not a millennial. So I have my work email address. I have a work phone number. I have a work credit card that I used to buy the pizza with. I have my online email so that I only get spam in one email. I have my online credit card. I have my home phone number. I have a personal email. I mean, like when you start to add it all up, I'm creating distinct identities. Some are associated with Facebook and social and some aren't. And I'm not a millennial. So you can imagine the level of complexity and depth that these digital identities they'll be bringing into the workforce when you combine that with the new ways of working that they'll be engaging with different organizations. If you look at the other side of digital identities in countries where like coming by a national ID is a really hard thing to do, and you start to look at technologies like cryptocurrency or biometrics, or digital heartbeats that you can have on your phone, you start to be able to overcome some of the challenges that we don't even think about in our normal day-to-day interaction, although probably you guys do, but in terms of the power of digital technologies to create identities that are meaningful for people around the world. So this one I picked intentionally because it's probably a little bit outside. This is definitely more on the consumer side, but I wanted to show you guys the kinds of conversations that we're having with different sectors. The experience economy. So how many of you have heard of the sharing economy? Most of you, right? So Zipcar, City Car Share, Airbnb is a big one. Uber kind of treads in that space. So that's the sharing economy, which is making use of existing resources and assets. So again, talking about the millennials, they're much more likely to spend their money having an experience than they are owning a car. That's really what all of the statistics are saying. And so the car companies, just as an example, I mean, pick an asset. The car companies are getting a little bit frightened of that. If most of the millennials don't want to buy cars, what are they going to sell? And one of the things that they're realizing that they can tap into is the fact that the millennials are willing to spend money on experience. So if you think about how you can extrapolate that with a car company, if you own a premium car company brand, it's the brand and the image that you're trying to sell today, and of course the car. But maybe you become just the transportation brand for someone who wants to get from San Francisco to a meeting in downtown London. So today there are kind of like VIP things where you have like your VIP with United Airlines and you have your VIP with Hilton, and it's kind of hodgepodge together. You can imagine that some company sells you the equivalent of a car fob or a digital keychain, and as you go throughout the world, they're curating your experience for you, and you are sort of buying into that curated experience. They haven't taken that all the way yet, but this is Lexus's store in Japan, and they've actually created a curated store. So they have all of the premium brands there. They have a cafe there. They have high-speed internet. They're inviting people to come down and sit and participate in this Lexus curated experience that they're working on. And then gamification. So I heard you guys are talking about gamification, and I have my favorite video to share. Maybe some of you have seen this.
This is London. We go.
So we're gonna ignore the band.
The VW.
So part of the reason that I love that video, first of all, who knows how much they changed the behavior of going up the stairs? 66%. Yeah.
62%, yeah.
66%. That's a not insignificant amount of behavior change, right? And how did they do it?
Fun.
They made it fun. It really wasn't complicated. They made it fun. But the first thing that they understood was what behavior they wanted to nudge, right? They were really clear that we don't want people to go up the escalator. We want them to get healthier by going up the stairs. And did they hand out stickers when they got to the top? No, that's not that fun. They actually made it an interactive, fun experience that when people had a decision and they saw other people doing it a certain way, they wanted to do it that way too. So this is a trend that's really high on the Gartner hype curve right now, but we're working with our own internal people as well as our customers to understand how to use things like gamification for behavior change in really meaningful ways. And those are kind of the two big things, is understanding what you want to do and don't just slap a badge on it, but make it actually interactively fun so that when people see it, they want to do it too. We talk about a lot of different innovation enablers. So these are some of the things that just to sort of be aware about and how and when you're executing innovation projects. So the project that we did with a consumer goods company a couple of weeks ago was really focused on positive impact and new business models. How do we create sustainable business models while driving social change? Part of the way that we do that is through understanding user experience, as an example, right? I mean, I was mentioning my Maasai guide when I was in Kenya last year. He had this Android phone, and his Android experience was super important to him. He loved his Android phone, and he should, and we all should have great user experience everywhere. So we need to be designing with user experience at all levels in mind. And you guys know the other ones, but there's been a big shift in terms of, companies being able to just sort of say this is the way that it's going to be, and really having to now understand what their either employees or customers or stakeholders want, and making sure that they're designing for that. And these are the types of things that we keep in mind when we work with our customers. So let me give you some examples that we've done with business transformation. These are some of the projects that have come out of the studio or that we've worked with different teams for. I have intentionally picked a kind of cross-section of examples. We have a ton of social impact ones in emerging markets that I could have chosen, but I just want you to get a sense of the cross-section. How many of you spent any time in Silicon Valley? Anyone?
Not much.
Does anyone know what this building is? Yeah, you know what it is? What is it?
I think it's Oracle.
Yeah, So there's a company across the water from us who's a really big customer of ours. And so this is a joke, especially for people in Silicon Valley, but there are businesses out there that are trying to attract and retain top talent. And particularly in Silicon Valley, it's super competitive. How do they get, there's a limited number of coders. How do they get the best coders, right? And being able to provide flexible tools, making them, allowing them to have kind of the best of breed, whatever that is this year, this month, or this week. But there's a lot, this particular company, more than others, has some pretty serious security concerns because they do enterprise focused applications. Right. And so they had a challenge of, being able to provide the latest and greatest tool with all the security things that they needed in a way that made people want them. So we worked with them to understand the user behaviors and the needs of their users, and we created a tiered program for them. So there's kind of like the platinum, gold, silver standard. So if you get the platinum version, you get one of the devices that they've approved. It has the mobile device manager with all of the credentials that you need. And you never see a bill. And we have an outsourced help desk that we support for them, so that the company doesn't ever have to manage them, and all the way down. So you get down to the most basic level, and you can bring your own device, but you're going to get very limited access to internal resources. You're not going to be able to get on the Wi-Fi, etc. What we did, though, was when we pushed out the credentials, we actually worked with them to put quality of service settings on their network. So when people had kind of the top tier premium service, they were actually getting faster speeds on the network too. And that's a little bit where that gamification comes in, because, when I'm traveling to London and I'm downloading some of my stuff for my meeting, and I look over at my coworker who's getting super blazing speeds, I'm going to pay attention and be like, how did you get those really awesome speeds? And they'll be like, well, I got the corporate approved device with the settings. And that nudges me a little bit more in the direction of not needing to bring in my own device, but using that corporate approved, very strategic device. Oh yeah, these are the kind of things that we thought about when we were working with them. Employee satisfaction was obviously one of the biggest ones. How many of you have heard of SMS for Life aside from the guys that were in the room today? Couple? Okay. So we're at version 2.0 now, but I'm going to show you a video about the 1.0 version that we released a couple years ago. It's really quiet. At least you have. So the thing that I love about that story, aside from like the obvious awesome like impact to society, is it was built on really basic core technologies like text messaging. And it wasn't that the malarial drugs didn't exist. It was a question of having visibility through the supply chain to make sure that they were at the right place at the right time. We did that by using this basic tool called text messaging and a sort of easy backend database called Process Tracker. And when we rolled it out, we said, let's think about how we're going to get this technology into the hands of the people, because the people had reporting tools before. That wasn't the problem. How do we nudge the people to use the reporting tools that we're giving them? Sure, these are digital and they're more real time, but if people don't use them, they're still no good, right? So we had a carrot and a stick. The carrot was that we would provide mobile top-ups for the people in the clinics who did the reporting in the time that was specified. So say Friday afternoon, the clinic worker was supposed to update the inventory. If they did, they got the mobile top-up. If they didn't, then a text message would be sent to their boss. And if they didn't rectify it, up to their boss, and so on up the food chain until somebody got the red alert and did something about it. Additionally, the mother with the child could text into the system and find out, if there's one that's 5 kilometers away and one that's 8 kilometers away, it might be worth walking the extra 3K if the drugs are actually there, right? So we were able to sort of nudge the behaviors of the people who needed the access to the medicine too. And so what we're looking at is, new kind of social innovation business models for how do we get these things to scale. So we're at 2.0, looking at 2.0, actually rolling out 2.0 across Africa. This example takes us in the complete other direction. So as we're looking at new business models, I mentioned the car companies earlier. I didn't realize I chose 2 car company stories, but every BMW that comes off the line has a Vodafone SIM in it.
Oh.
And the reason that they do that is originally it was for predictive analytics and the ability to provide mapping services, just like you're familiar with TomTom or Google Maps. But they're actually entering into whole new business markets. So BMW has a company called Drive Now, which is their version of Zipcar car share. So you can get, if on a map, you can find where the local BMW car is, the Drive Now car. If you're a registered user, you get an authentication code, you type it in, and you can basically drive the BMW for an afternoon and leave it back in a spot. So we're helping them also flex into new business areas too. I was going to show you, and unfortunately I don't have my cable that works with this, but I'm happy to show you guys later. This is one of our prototypes that we have developed. It is about confidently connecting you with anyone in the organization, knowing what time zone they're in. It's cross-platform, so it brings in our entire global address lookup, which is do this today. We didn't have a tool to do that. How do I find someone within that 100,000 person organization, not just within the 5,000 people within VGE? We have the ability to push out news, so you can see all of the different stories and wins and things. So if you want to do an information dissemination tool, I have the ability to set actually the fact that I'm on a business trip right now, and you can see that I'm on New York time instead of California time when you're trying to message me. And we did a secure chat. So we brought all of these things together. And the next iteration that we're launching next week is one-click calling. So we don't care what platform you're on. You could be on WebEx or Skype or whatever. And with one click, we can sort of launch you into whatever conference, Google Hangouts, whatever it is, we can launch you into that sort of painlessly. So that's just one of the prototypes. It's actually really beyond prototype at this point that our team has created based on response to both our internal stakeholders as well as our customers. So I'm conscious of time. We're done at 1:30.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a ton more examples, but I'm happy to just open it for questions if you guys are interested. Let me just finish with one thing. So we would go through all of these examples, and then in an innovation workshop, we would have the walls, the whiteboards filled with ideas, and we would dive into an ideation session. We picked the 3-year time horizon really intentionally. 5 years out is kind of anyone's guess. I mean, we're kind of looking around the 3 to 5 year time horizon, but beyond that, like, we can make stuff up and kind of, sure, we'll take bets in 5 years and see. And a lot of the projects are already underway in the kind of short term. So we're looking at that midterm when we're thinking about what is the world that we want to create look like in 2018. And then we dive into an ideation session. So we get the room covered with sticky notes eventually. We ask people to kind of synthesize everything that was surfaced that day and come up with solutions to some of the challenges or opportunities. And you're not stuck in your role. So if you're HR and you want to come up with an operations idea, like everything's on the table. We do it quietly because we don't want groupthink. This is hard for some groups and not for others. Just like 10 minutes, guys, 10 minutes of quiet thinking. We ask each person to do a minimum of 10 ideas because the creative juices really get flowing after the first 5 or so. Usually the first 5 are some kind of regurgitation of what we had already surfaced during the day. And we ask, there are rewards for people who go kind of biggest or craziest. We had someone come up with space flight insurance for one of our insurance companies the other day, which I thought was awesome and not too far-fetched. And then we go through a process of convergence and divergence. So the divergence is everyone going off and creating their own ideas. If we have 20 people in a room, then we have 200 ideas. What do you do with that? You have to bring them all down together and look at where some of the synergies were. And then we might get that down to, 20 ideas, and then we share it again. And then we just go through a process until, as a group, we think that we have the top sort of 3 to 8 ideas, some in the short term, some in the midterm, and some in the long term. And we do this by looking at the types of impact that we can have. So we can have either financial or social impact on a rating scale, We can have ease of execution, which is strongly tied to, but not exactly the same as the time to execution. And so what happens is we get a graph, and if there's a super high impact idea that we can execute with ease tomorrow, that's the idea that we're going to go after. And so we get a really clear visualization of what we want to pursue together. And we really believe that, you know, bringing these two teams together is the best way to move forward, because we don't know your guys' world as well, and we're hoping that we can share some insights into how ICT can help, mobility can help. All right, any questions?
Also, for those viewing online, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box.
You mentioned human-centered design a couple of times in your introduction, and then kind of in the flow, the ideation. Could you talk a little bit about how you use that at Vodafone? How it was introduced, how your team uses it specifically, what kind of benefits it's brought?
Yeah, so we like to actually take, I do use that term and we do use it, but we like to take sort of the best practices from a bunch of different methodologies. So like we said, the Lean Startup book to all of our innovation champions, and we use a lot of the things that are surfaced there along with kind of agile development capabilities. In terms of the human-centered design, I mean, it's one of the pieces that we've picked out in terms of first and foremost, making sure that you understand the needs of the customer. So when we went back out to look at SMS for Life 2.0 as an example, before we even got into the room and started workshopping the first day, and we had 16 executives from the customer fly down, before we even got into the day to start the ideation, we went to their manufacturing and distribution centers. We went into their rural clinics and their urban clinics with kind of our innovation goggles on together, because we have that outsider perspective as well. So we can ask the questions, well, what's going on there? And we also, of course, when we're having that conversation, have some sense about how mobility could help potentially transform the things that we're seeing or empower, you know, scale up some of the things that we're seeing. So that's just one example. We don't do that all the time, but we always try and bring the idea of personas or users into the room. Like I said, I'm really big into native innovation. So we don't just want a bunch of people in Silicon Valley ideating for the sense of ideating without any connection to the real world. And that's really what we're trying to avoid. Whatever tools we need to use is the tools that we will use to avoid that. We are in a world where we have to be a little bit opportunistic. So, you know, it would be great if for every workshop we could spend a day in the field, a day in the room ideating, and a day coming up with a defined project plan. I can tell you how many times it's happened, and it's less than 10, right? So we have to be strategic about where and when we're doing that. The other thing that we do that we were talking about is we will do the native innovation by having the champions in the room representing the voice of the users. We'll co-develop the personas in the room. And then when we go out to test the idea, to test the hypothesis, we will get the prototypes in front of the users, watch the users before we even start engaging with them, and make sure that our hypotheses are sort of headed in the right direction. Is that helpful?
Yep.
We actually have a question from Rajiv Shrivastava online, and he thanks you for the great presentation and wants to know if you could talk about a project that your team is involved in that addresses poverty reduction, environmental degradation, something along those lines.
Yeah, the one that we kicked off just a couple weeks ago, we had 3 ideas. So the focus was, so the customer that we had gotten money from DFID to explore how mobile technology can enable behavior change. And we refined that idea before we got all of the stakeholders into the room to focus on, in Kenya, around WASH behaviors that are going to be empowered by or imparted by women entrepreneurs. So it was a little bit scaled down, but it was still pretty broad. And we had 3 ideas that came out around that. A lot of the ideas that we surface, honestly, are building new capacities on things that already exist with an idea of how do we crack the nut to get that to scale? We don't always need to reinvent the wheel. So things like, you know, I'm not sure how much I can go into the specifics of that, but I mentioned earlier another one, which is about financial inclusion for smallholder farmers. We have a huge portfolio around supporting different organizations in their engagement with smallholder farmers. Everything from the initial registering them on the tool and the database to being able to send them either vouchers for food, cashless payments, send them information about weather for crop production. I mean, there's a huge set of tools around that. So the answer is we do a lot in this space.
Yeah. And maybe, go ahead.
Where can I find information about that what you just said about cash.
Cashless payments and vouchers.
Yeah.
Come up to me after and I'll give you my card, and
Okay.
Jacob can help you too.
But
Sorry, did you introduce yourself, Jacob?
No, I didn't get a chance.
Do you want to take just 1 minute?
Sorry
It's
about
important that everybody knows him
Yeah, no
because he's
worries.
based here locally in New York, so he's your guy.
Hi everyone, Jacob Cooney. I'm what they call the national account manager at Vodafone. So I am responsible for the relationship between Vodafone and the UN. As it pertains to the US, there's somebody called a global account manager that sits in Kenya, who's got the overall large relationship. So here in the US, I'm based in New York, but I manage the relationship between the UN and Vodafone.
And he's just up the street, so.
yeah, maybe just a quick reflection on my part, because obviously Vodafone is has a concern with the bottom line. Obviously, that's what they do. They sell services, and that's what they're. And we are concerned with social impact and maximizing development outcomes. The reason we're talking about Vodafone is because it's not so much because you have good programs around social impact. Obviously, I'm familiar with the M-Pesa type innovation over the years. It's been enabling people to move cash and so on. It's more about us, certainly parochially from the innovation unit perspective, to look and see how they go about promoting and fostering innovation within their own teams. A lot of these methodologies around co-creation, co-design, design with the users are things that we can take on board on development, and we do indeed take on board in the development world. We already have a number of these initiatives across the world that very much rely on this. It was interesting for me to see how you go about running your innovation workshops. We have similar experiences. It would be good to continue this conversation with you guys to see what sort of cross-fertilization we can have around this. You also made a point of mention, say, digital identities. For instance, to me, from the development perspective, that translates in this endless myriad of possibilities of bringing together all this data that flows through different devices, more increasingly so. And how do we capture that for the purposes that we want to drive? How do we capture that volume of data to monitor SDG type progress over the next 15 years, since we have our agenda cut out for us now? How do we go about using that to monitor climate change, and how to monitor climate changes, and how to on this whole disaster risk reduction element? There's lots of good examples around the world. Sometimes they are isolated. Sometimes UNDP has been driving them. I think it's excellent to get also the feedback from some of the industry operators, what common ground there might be around that. And that is a little bit what the innovation facility aims and aspires to do, is to create, to bring in some of these partners that can also help us think outside the box a little bit. You mentioned the sharing economies. To me, that means income generation in certain elements. I think the challenge for us in UNDP, when we hear all these things, and you guys are one of the companies that does innovation in certain ways. The challenge is how to take it on board and how to challenge ourselves to come up with ideas that are innovative within our mandate, and how to use this data, for instance, to measure impact. And it's I think through a mix of the things you mentioned, ranging from leadership to technical skills and the availability of technology, by all means. So that is a little bit the way I like to also look at the talk today, quite beyond the fact that I'm sure you have all manners of CSR type programs that around the world. But it was really good to hear about some methodologies.
Yeah, and you raise a good point. I didn't show you a single foundation-driven example today, so we have a ton of those. What I'm personally super interested in, though, is sustainable business innovation, which is making models that are going to be sustainable for the long term. When the development goes away from a particular area, how is that program going to continue? How are the companies going to continue to make revenue so that they keep investing in it and keep supporting it and moving it forward? And I think there's a huge opportunity for us there. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks for your time, guys. I just want to say, we have a sign-in sheet, and we would really appreciate the opportunity to send a survey for how we did today. So if you haven't signed in the sign-in sheet, thanks.
Thank you.